Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's jump right into a fascinating legal showdown that proves just how incredibly powerful your written contracts actually are. Today we're unpacking a landmark dispute: Kesang Leasing Sdn Bhd versus Mohd Yusof bin Ismail. Whether you're a law student trying to untangle contract law or a business owner closing deals on a daily basis, this case is an absolute masterclass in why the exact words you agree to on paper matter so much.
Right off the bat, we've got to ask a pretty crucial question, one that gets right to the heart of business agreements. Can a written contract apply a law that normally wouldn't even apply? Think about that for a second. We usually just assume the law dictates the contract, right? Like statutes are this rigid ceiling over what we can and can't do. But what happens if two people sit down, sign a piece of paper, and voluntarily decide to pull a completely unrelated piece of legislation into their own private agreement? Well, let's see exactly how that played out in the real world.
Section 1. The hire purchase dispute. So, let's introduce our main characters and the business deal that set everything in motion. The timeline is super straightforward, but it sets up a giant legal puzzle. Step 1. A customer, Mohd Yusof, visits a company called Kesang Leasing. He's just looking to get a desktop computer for his office under a standard hire purchase agreement. Step 2. Both parties sit down, hash out the terms, and formally sign on the dotted line. Everything seems totally normal, right? The computer is delivered, he starts using it for work, but then we hit step 3. Sometime later, a pretty serious legal dispute breaks out between the customer and the leasing company, and it's right here that things take a wild turn.
Section 2. The missing first schedule.
When this whole mess finally reached the courtroom, the lawyers started digging in and discovered a massive legal loophole. Naturally, they had to consult the governing law for this kind of deal, which is the Hire Purchase Act of 1967. More specifically, they zeroed in on the first schedule of the Act. Now, if you aren't familiar, the first schedule is basically a master statutory list. It defines exactly which specific goods are protected and covered by the specific law. If your item is on that list, the Act applies. Simple enough. But if it's not, well, you're generally operating completely outside the protections of the Hire Purchase Act. And here is where the plot thickens. The lawyers pointed out a glaring, totally unexpected issue. At the time of this case, desktop computers were entirely missing from that statutory list. They were literally not listed as an item under the first schedule. So one side basically threw their hands up and argued, hey, this is a fight over a computer. The law clearly says the Hire Purchase Act only covers goods in the first schedule. Computers aren't in there, therefore the Act can't possibly apply to us. I mean, it sounds like an airtight technicality, doesn't it?
Section 3. The special contract clause.
You would really think the case would be closed right there on that technicality. But a single piece of paper changed the entire trajectory of the case. The judge took a very close look at the actual signed agreement, looking past just the statute book. And boom, here's the plot twist. There was a special clause sitting right there in the document. It clearly stated that both parties explicitly agreed in their contract to be bound by the provisions of the HPA. When Mohd Yusof and Kesang Leasing finalized their deal, they didn't just use a generic template. They specifically wrote down that their agreement would be governed by the Hire Purchase Act, completely voluntarily incorporating it into their business relationship.
So the whole courtroom debate boiled down to this epic collision. On side A, we've got the default law. The first schedule completely omits desktop computers, so by default, the act shouldn't apply at all. But then on side B, we've got the contract, the specific, written, intentional choice of the two parties explicitly dragging the Hire Purchase Act into the mix. It's a classic legal tug of war. Does the strict default letter of the statute win out and invalidate the clause? Or does the mutual voluntary agreement of two private people actually have the power to override a statutory omission?
Section 4. The court's final ruling. The judge had to make a definitive choice between the default boundaries of the statute and the express written will of the contract. After carefully examining all the facts, the court delivered a ruling that set a really powerful precedent. First, the court acknowledged the technicality. Yes, a computer is absolutely not covered by the strict statutory definition of goods under the first schedule at that specific time. However, and this is the turning point, the parties mutually agreed to the terms. The court ruled that because there was a clear, mutual, and explicit agreement to incorporate those terms, the Act will apply. Their private agreement effectively built a bridge over the gap left by the statute.
Section 5. The power of express agreement.
Let's distill exactly why this ruling is so absolutely crucial for law students, legal professionals, and business owners everywhere. The entire precedent here hinges on the concept of express agreement. Basically, this is a clear, mutual, and explicitly stated intention by contracting parties to pull specific terms or outside laws directly into their contract. It just goes to show that contracts aren't only about what the law permits by default, they are highly customizable tools. You can literally write your own rules of engagement and hold each other to external standards, as long as it's done clearly and mutually. So, your ultimate takeaway from this explainer is this: the Hire Purchase Act can apply by express agreement. Clear contractual intention can successfully incorporate an act, completely overriding a missing statutory schedule. The court deeply respected the autonomy of the two parties. They said, look, you wanted the Hire Purchase Act to govern your computer lease, and the court held them exactly to that promise, regardless of what the first schedule happened to lack at the time. It really leaves us with a fascinating thought about the hidden power of the contracts we sign every single day. If clear expressed intention has the power to pull an entire outside law into your private agreement, what unexpected rules or standards might you be voluntarily agreeing to the next time you quickly sign on the dotted line? Always, always read the fine print, because as this case proves, your written intentions are incredibly powerful. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the details.